Okay, so after 14 years of just devastating conflict, Syria is at a monumental crossroads. I mean, the task of rebuilding seems almost impossible. But for the first time in over a decade, there's a real plan. So, what is the plan? What does this blueprint for Syria's economic future actually look like? To really get what's at stake here, you have to start with this number. 9 out of every 10 Syrians now live below the poverty line. I mean, this isn't just an economic crisis, it's a human catastrophe on a scale that's, well, it's just hard to wrap your head around.
But, even in the middle of all that devastation, a historic moment has arrived. There was a political transition back in December 2024, and that has created this rare, fragile window of opportunity for reconstruction and, hopefully, for renewal.
So, what comes next? And look, this isn't about just slapping some bandages on the problem. We're talking about a strategic plan to build a whole new foundation for the country's economy, and ultimately for its peace.
All right, so first things first, we really have to get a handle on the sheer scale of the destruction. The numbers are so big, they're almost abstract, but they represent the near total collapse of what was a modern economy. $800 billion. That's the estimated loss in GDP between 2011 and 2025. $800 billion of lost potential, lost production, lost livelihoods. That's a number so big it's basically erased almost 40 years of development. Just gone.
Now, this chart really puts that devastation into perspective. That drop you see for Syria, nearly 80% in household consumption, it just dwarfs what we saw in other major 21st century conflicts like Iraq and Bosnia. The scale of this crisis it's truly unprecedented.
And it's not just the economy, it's the very fabric of daily life. This shows the systemic breakdown. We're talking about over a third of all housing, just gone. 1 in every 3 schools is either damaged or totally destroyed. And more than half of the country's water treatment plants simply don't work anymore. So officially, the unemployment rate is over 25%. But let's be real, the true picture is so much worse. When you add in underemployment, people working part-time who need full-time work, or highly skilled people in low-skill jobs, and the collapse of the formal economy, the real rate of joblessness is just astronomical. Basically, the entire job market has just broken down. Okay, but here's where the story starts to shift. Because the narrative is slowly moving from one of devastation to one of opportunity. Since late 2024, a few key events have created a genuine possibility for a different future. You can see on this timeline how things started to change. It all kicked off with that political transition. That was followed by the return of over 1 million refugees, and they're bringing back not just their families, but their skills and capital. Then, you see these crucial new bodies forming, like the US-Syria Business Council and a regional forum, which signals that the world is starting to engage again. So, with this new momentum, what's the actual plan? What's the blueprint? Well, it's a 5-part strategy. And the key thing here is that it's designed to be interconnected. Each piece is meant to support and reinforce the others. All right, here they are, the 5 main pillars of the plan. First, you create jobs right away by rebuilding essential infrastructure. Second, you revive the private sector because that's the long-term engine for growth. Third, you've got to restore a lost generation's skills with really targeted training. Fourth, protect workers with fair labor standards. And fifth, you reintegrate Syria into the region to get trade flowing again. So let's take a closer look at those first 3. Okay, this first part is absolutely crucial. The goal isn't to just rebuild the old economy, centralized, totally reliant on oil, and really vulnerable to shocks. The idea is to leapfrog, to build a new economy, one that's diversified, that's focused on things like tech and solar energy, creating resilient green jobs that can actually last. Now, for that second piece of the puzzle, private businesses, especially the small and medium ones, they are the real engine that's going to create jobs. But to get them going, the plan has to tackle these huge barriers head on. That means simplifying all the complex rules, creating new ways for them to get loans, rebuilding the infrastructure they need to operate, and of course, ensuring there's security for entrepreneurs. And that brings us to what might be the toughest, most complex challenge of all. After 14 years of schools being closed, of people being displaced, you have an entire generation whose skills have either vanished or were never developed in the first place. So how do you even begin to fix that? So how do you do it? The answer has to be super targeted and practical.
We're talking about demand-driven programs, things like teaching digital literacy for this new tech sector, or construction skills for the rebuilding effort. It means mapping the skills of people who are returning to the country so you can match them with jobs immediately. And all of it has to start by making the elimination of illiteracy a top national priority.
Okay, so this blueprint sounds pretty hopeful, right? But we have to be realistic. The plan is grounded in a very, very harsh reality. And the road ahead is absolutely filled with enormous challenges.
And one of the biggest risks, something they absolutely have to avoid, is what's called a K-shaped recovery. This is where the recovery path splits. The well-connected, people with resources, their fortunes rise. But the most vulnerable, the displaced, the rural poor, they actually fall even further behind. And that kind of rising inequality, it could tear social cohesion apart all over again. And that's not all. There are other huge risks on the table. First, the money. We're talking a funding gap of over $200 billion, a massive sum to raise. Then there's security. Unexploded landmines still make huge areas of farmland unusable and dangerous. And of course, any lingering political fragility is going to scare away the large-scale international investment that's needed for a full recovery. And all of this, all these challenges and plans, it brings us back to the most important point, the core idea of this whole thing. This economic plan isn't just about GDP numbers and employment stats. This is, at its heart, a strategy for building a lasting peace.
This quote from that regional forum back in 2025 really says it all. A job is so much more than just a paycheck. It gives people dignity, it creates social connections, and most importantly, it gives every single citizen a personal stake in a stable, peaceful future.
And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. In a country that has been completely shattered by conflict, where trust is gone and futures have been erased, could something as simple, as fundamental as a decent job truly be the most powerful tool we have for building peace?